Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our program, The Psychology of Salah, running on Ahlul Bayt TV. This is a 10-part series where we are looking at the psychological aspects of the prayer so that we can benefit more from our prayer on our day-to-day basis and inshallah in the long term as well. This is a 10-part series which is loaded up online, so you can access the rest of the programs online on YouTube. And today we are on program number 7. My guest is Brother Ghulam Abbas Laka, who's going to take us through the stages of the Salah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've had the opportunity to consider Salah from a practical psychology perspective, whereby the objective of our discussions are to try and get more from what we're already doing, particularly for those people who are really busy and who may only have 10 to 15 minutes for their prayers. I'm referring in specific to people who struggle for their afternoon prayers because they might be at lunch, they have a short lunch break, and they only have a few minutes during which to recite the Salah. Or indeed, parents or mothers who may have small children and only have a certain amount of time. And when we look at Salah through the lens of psychology, what we find is that there is an incredible amount of value that can be gleaned from short prayers. And this is not in any way to discourage long prayers if you have the time, but this is simply to say that even if we have just a limited amount of time, the depth of connection that we can get, the amount that we can drink from this incredible pool can satiate our thirst, can quench our thirst, and can satiate our spiritual hunger that we may come to the Salah with. And the reason why I'm looking at this approach is, from my professional experience in my years as an economist in the financial industry, I was in this situation for many years where I had only a short lunch break, and I would often ask myself, what did I get from that Salah? Because often the process of having to go and pray, find a place to pray, do wudu, and all of that can be quite stressful, particularly when you've had a busy morning, you've got a busy afternoon, and you've only got a certain amount of time. And sometimes when I'd be walking back to my desk after having said my prayers, I would ask myself the question, so what just happened? Did I just exercise a tick box process? Did I just go through that as, I have to do my prayers and I have to do wudu, I have to do azan, iqama, and yes, I go through a mental checklist, yes, I did all of that. But then it raises a practical question of, so what?
Yeah.
What actually happened in that? Because my niyyah, my objective, the motivation for this was qurbatan Allah, was proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So did I taste any of that sweetness? Or did I simply lose 10, 15 minutes of my lunch break? Lose, of course, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
Now, I asked this question provocatively because that's actually the reality that happens to many people. I discovered that I wasn't the only person who was negligent in this way. And many other people who have the same stresses, particularly for the lunchtime prayer, face the same thing. And that forced me to look more closely at what is available from Salah, not just for the hereafter and our fulfillment of our legal obligations, but really the why of it. Why do we have that legal obligation within Islamic law? What is it that the most compassionate, the most merciful? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces himself in this way as Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim well over 100 times in the Holy Quran. And in the opening surah, Surah Fatiha, this is how he introduces himself at the outset, Bismillah, in the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate, most merciful. And in case we missed it, he reiterates it in verse 3. After Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, he then reasserts Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So then it changes the question. Not that, what did I get from that quick 10-minute Salah, but what was available from that 10-minute Salah.
Yeah.
And I focus on the 10 minutes because all too often we're told nowadays that, look, I'm too busy to be able to say my prayers in that level that you read about that the great scholars do, because they have the opportunity to spend an hour saying their prayers. I don't. I have this pressure and I have that pressure, and so that opportunity is not for me. I can only do this quick thing and then get back, and that's the best I can do. And the point of this series is to challenge and to say, no, we can get more. We too, each of us, have a personal invitation to a divine banquet. And we can choose how much we gain from that. Because what we gain is not just a function of how much time we spend, but it's a deeper question of how much presence we have, how much mindfulness we have while we are doing it. And we remind ourselves in our previous discussions about how the great spiritual ascension of the Holy Prophet, peace upon him and his holy progeny, during Miraj, happened in a very short period of earthly time. We're told that the chain on his door was still moving when he returned. Yet, we believe, the inner shaitan, that miraj of the believer that we're told Salah represents is not available for us. And I want to really challenge this misconception. And the way we can challenge it, one of the ways, is to look at the psychology that is available within Salah. Right from the beginning, in terms of our wudu and how the process of ablution, the water itself is a process of connecting. Just as the drop may fall from our face into the pool of the water, we too can dissolve into the pool of that unity of Tawheed just through wudu and establish that connection already. Through the process of qibla, of orientating to ourselves towards that direction that all Muslims pray towards, and of course across time as well. There's an intertemporal dimension where all the saints orientated themselves towards that point. So that even if my salah is only a few minutes, I am tapping into the timeless. And so I have the opportunity to connect with the one who is beyond time and beyond space.
I was just going to say there's some excellent points, because I have had, again, especially young people who are being raised again in the westernized environment, because we've got viewers all around the world, but of course now cultures all around the world are highly westernized. We've got these modern urban cities, stressed environments, and yet they are feeling that their goal, what they would like to attain, is what they have read that this master attained, this great figure, this great scholar attained, and they are asking, how can I attain that as well? And sometimes when you read kind of the medieval itineraries written by these masters on how to purify the soul and so on, you sometimes think, it's occurred to me, well, they were in a different environment. They, and they were in an environment that supported this whole journey of the soul. And maybe they had the time. No one was going to object if they took 30 minutes for their prayer. Where are the instructions? Where is the guidance for those who are living in pressured, urbanized, environments now? And I think that we don't have enough of that. And it's a good point that you're making.
And I think that when the Holy Quran really asserts the importance of Salah as a spiritual vehicle, if we believe that the Quran is a text beyond time and beyond space, so for all people, from the medieval days to the 21st century and beyond, then we need to have our own understanding of these verses. So for instance, if we look at Surah Ankabut, Surah 29, verse 45, it speaks very clearly about the role of Salah in this process of spiritual purification that you mentioned, saying, Inna salata tanha anil fahshai wal munkar, that indeed prayer is a way to purify, to almost to preclude immorality and wrongdoing. Why? Because walidhikrillahi akbar, that this is one of the greatest forms of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it is dhikrullahi akbar, then how so? What is it about Salah compared to all the other ways of remembering Allah that makes it so great? I once had a young person say to me, look, why is it important that I should have to follow this prescribed formula of praying in this way, physically, in this direction, with this particular state of ablution, reciting these particular things, bowing, prostrate, when actually I can just connect to God in my own way at my desk, while I'm walking, while I'm driving, and that's my prayer. Why do I have to do this salah at these particular times of the day? And actually, this verse of the Quran answers that in a way by saying that salah is the greatest form of dhikr. All the other things that this person mentioned is valid.
Yeah.
To remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beyond the prayer mat, that's what the salah facilitates. That's the point of the salah.
Yeah.
But the salah is the engine of progress and development for the believer because of all the dimensions that it has. And we remind ourselves of the earlier verses that we were looking at, that the Holy Quran provides both as a warning and as a promise. So Surah Ma'un saying, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, woe upon those who pray. That's shocking in a way, that woe upon those who pray. But why? And it goes on to clarify, to qualify that, saying, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, those who are heedless about their prayers. And I say that with a heavy heart because I was heedless. In my busy professional life, when I was trying to go and say my dhaharas or prayers, in a way I was heedless because I was heedless of what was really available. I attended the banquet, but I was fasting. I didn't actually participate in tasting the fruit that was there because I was so busy thinking about the next step. So when I was doing wudu, I was thinking about where I'm going to pray, which office can I pray in. And then the next step was, okay, so when I'm praying, then I'm going to be thinking about, so what am I going to do when I get back to my desk? Or what do I have to do else during this lunch hour? I was never actually there. And this is where the other verses of the Quran are so important in Surah Mu'minun, which says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, at the beginning of the surah. Surely the believers have been successful. But how? In what way? And it qualifies that, saying, الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ, those who are mindful about their prayers. And it reiterates this in verse 9 with the word yuhafidhun, about protecting and guarding our prayer. This is something sacred. So in our previous discussions, we looked at how we can maintain this mindfulness all the way from wudu to qibla, from adhan, ikama, the point about reciting that and the angels coming to pray with us. And as we are mindful that we're leading the angels in prayer, it changes the way we ourselves pray. And through takbirat al-ihram and the qiyam that we were talking about last time and the recitations therein, we now reach the stage of Qunoot and Ruku. So after the second rak'ah, we often raise our hands in Qunoot. And here, just like the second surah of each rak'ah, the first two rak'ahs of each prayer, we have the opportunity to recite whatever we want within, but particularly, I mean, whichever surahs we would like as the second surah. And in Qunoot, equally, we have this freedom of reciting verses from the Quran, principally, as a special prayer that speaks to where we are at that point in time. Remember, one of the points about the psychology of Salah is that it addresses our changing psychological needs throughout the day. We're not allowed to say all the 5 prayers in one go in the morning and be done with it. Then I'm done for the day. Then I can tick that box off my list of things to do for the day. No. The rules prescribe that the prayers have to be spread out during the day, just as we may need to breathe at regular intervals. We don't just take all our breaths in one day for the whole day in the morning, and then we just get on with the day. No, breathing is a part of being alive. And for the spiritual life requires the breath of Salah. Salah becomes the breath of the soul to breathe and to resuscitate itself, to rejuvenate itself, indeed, to renew itself. So that when I go back to my desk after having said my prayers, I should be renewed and rejuvenated rather than stressed about what a busy lunch break I've just had, what a productive lunch break I've just had. And I use the word productive deliberately because we regard it as a good thing. That I had such a productive lunch break, I said my prayers, I did the dry cleaning, I got some lunch, etc. But actually, Salah is not about being productive. Salah is not about what I have done or what I have achieved in that. It is not about me. I am insignificant in that. Salah is a gift. But because it's a gift, it frees me from having to do and having to achieve. We can put that doing mode of being behind us when we recite the Takbiratul Ihram. then we're in that process of connecting. And Qunoot is such an opportunity. When we raise our hands, the Qunoot that we recite at Dhuhr can be very different to what we recited at Fajr, because we're in a different state. It is an opportunity for us to connect with the reality of that moment, the pressures that we may be facing at that time of the day. And this is why it is useful to have a repertoire of different Qunuts that we can recite. From the very short, so in particular, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, salawatullah alayhi, taught a specific Qunut that we are told is for the people of the final days, whose lives will be particularly pressurized. And it is a simple one-verse Qunut. It says, Ya Allahu, Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim. Oh, my Lord, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Ya Allahu, Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, Ya Muqallib al-Qulub, Thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Oh, the one who protects the hearts, who guides the hearts. Guide my heart, protect my heart to be steadfast upon your path. Now, if we're really rushed, this is a very short Qunut to recite. Yeah. Shorter than our usual Qunut of Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana. Oh Allah, give me good in this world. Wa fil akhirati hasana. And good in the hereafter. Wa qina adhaban nar. And free me from the tribulations of hell, which we can sometimes create in this world. We can create a hell in this world for ourselves and for others. But the point about Qunut is multifold. Firstly, it's about that personal connection. In Surah Maryam, when we talk about, when we read what the Quranic verses discuss about the opening of Zachariah's heart to his Lord, we have the verse إِذْ نَادَ رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا, that in verse 3, that this was a nida, which is like a whispered communication between the beloved and the beloved. And they had this nida and khafiyya, this intimate communication about what was really burdening him. Qunut represents that for us. It is that nida for us within Salah. So we can recite any number of different Qunuts. For example, at the end of Surah Baqarah, the second surah, the longest surah of the Holy Quran, towards the end there are many beautiful verses, short verses, some more longer verses, that have different types of Qunut. And the psychology of each of them is really quite powerful, because one of the points of modern psychology is the way it interacts with mental health through psychotherapy. And when we look at some of the tools of psychotherapy, one of the most important and widely used is cognitive behavior therapy. And one of the key parts of cognitive behavior therapy is what we would call tafakkur and tadabbur, which would be self-reflections and self-analysis, and a more wider contemplation. But the point of self-analysis, of self-reflection, of becoming aware of our thinking, what we are feeling right now, is really important for psychotherapy. But it's also really important for a good Qunut, for an effective Qunut. And what do I mean by a good, effective Qunut? I mean a Qunut in which we are there. Not where we are elsewhere, thinking about what we were doing in the morning, the problem we were dealing with in the morning, or the meeting I have after lunch that I need to prepare for. But a Qunut where it is that nida and khafiyya, like Zachariah had, whereby it is an opening, present conversation between us and our Lord. But conversation means there's feedback. So where is the feedback in Qunut? Well, we go back to Surah Maryam, where Zachariah says, وَلَمَ كُنْ بِدُعَائِكَ رَبِّ شَقِيًّا, that never has it been that my calling to you, that my supplicating to you, my invocation to you has been
they say unblessed sometimes.
Unblessed, but that is a common translation. وَلَمْ أَكُنْ بِدُعَائِكَ رَبِّ شَقِيًّا. But shaqiyya actually is not just about unblessed, it's about a lack of response.
Right.
Unheeded. That someone says hello to you and you just walk past them. That hello was unheeded in that sense. It was unfulfilled. A request was unfulfilled. And what Zachariah is saying is, never has it been that my prayer has been unfulfilled. By the way, he was praying for a son for many, many years. But But yet he says that it was never unfulfilled. So what is the fulfillment then? So in Qunoot, when we raise our hands saying, Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, oh Allah, give me blessing in this world. Yet I am suffering from the depths of depression, a darkness in the heart, that how some people describe it as a dark cloud. Others describe it in different ways. But when I'm suffering from depression, how can Qunoot help me in that time? Well, just the recognition that actually I'm going through a period of darkness and help the sunlight to come through. That hope is important. And there is increasing evidence, particularly from positive psychology and other research endeavors, that the psychology of hope is incredibly powerful for therapeutic purposes.
Right.
And if you believe that the therapy you're engaged in is going to be effective, what they call plausibility, you're more likely to get measurably better outcomes from your psychotherapy. Salah can be a process of therapy for us, particularly Qunoot. One of the reasons why I want to focus on Qunoot is that flexibility that we get to recite whatever we want allows us, within reason, particularly we're taught to select from the du'as within the verses of the Holy Quran. But those verses span a range of issues: emotional worries, financial worries, social worries, health worries, so that we're able to bring out our anxieties into the open, so that they no longer remain hidden in the shadows, affecting our well-being, but we can bring them out into the light and raise them in Qunoot so that they can be openly acknowledged.
I read as well regarding Qunoot, apart from the, obviously in other schools of thought it has faded out, and I remember reading a book by someone who was writing about Islam from one of the Sunni madhabs, and he was expressing regret that Qunoot has more or less died out in the Salah, in those schools of thought, apart from Fajr, and not everybody does it for Fajr. So that again is a blessing that it has been retained, you know, in this the way of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And I was also reading about Qunoot that it is about having that attitude of vulnerability, reaching out to Allah, and expressing your distress. So it's a place where you can express all that, your feeling of vulnerability as a human being before Allah. That's one point that I read about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize that there is strength in doing so. Often we find that we're deemed to be weak when we are acknowledging our weaknesses. But actually there is a strength in that recognition of the weakness that we have. And it's only in recognizing the problem do we stand a chance of being able to address it. And if you look at if you regard Salah like a beautiful sentence, if you look at the syntax of that sentence, the ordering of the words, the point that the Qunoot comes before Ruku is quite beautiful, because having raised your hands in this personal prayer, so you can really personalize it and make it flexible, so that the Qunoot in Isha, the fifth Salah of the day, can be very different to the Qunoot of Dhuhr in the middle of the day, or Fajr. So we can have that dynamism and keep that Salah fresh. But then from there we go into Ruku. And Ruku really represents so many things. Here now we bring our physicality into being. If we look at mindfulness-based therapies for mental health, one of the techniques I have there is mindfulness of the body, and actually becoming embodied in the body, rather than just living in our mind,
Right.
disembodied in a sense, where our body just becomes a thing that we use, rather than actually feeling what we are feeling our feet on the ground, feeling the shape and the experience of being an embodied soul, rather than just a spirit that happens to be trapped in the body, but the body actually becoming a vehicle for our spiritual fulfillment. Ruku represents that, and in various texts, for example, Asrar al-Ibadat wal Haqiqa as-Salah, a book about the realities of Salah. Qadi Sayyid Qummi in this text talks about how Salah is really not just the middle point of a rak'ah, but is really the merging of the responsibility of the individual to his Lord and the submission to his Lord. So with responsibility, we stand and fulfill our duty and our responsibility. And in sujood, we're completely surrendered. Ruku is the intermediate point where we are active but in submission. We are bowing and yielding. How many books of spiritual poetry have described the willow tree as it bows and yields to the storm, compared to the oak that may be unyielding and then breaks in the storm? Yeah. That flexibility, so that when we go into ruku, having prayed for something, we then yield to the reality that this is what we are facing now. But we know we're not alone in that. And so also in these texts of the spiritual aspects, the inner aspects of ruku, we see many things from the Urafa, from the spiritual masters. Firstly, the connection to Surah Fatih. So in our previous discussions, we were looking at why Surah Fatih is so important that we recite it in all the prayers and in the first two rakats of each of them. When we look at the verse, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, that you and you alone do we worship and you alone do we seek help from. That is viewed as the middle point of Surah Fatiha, as in the first half being about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the second half being about the believers' return back to Allah. The ruku is regarded as the middle point of the salah, and in that sense is equivalent to that verse of Iyyaka na'budu. So as we recognize our bowing, but also Iyyaka nasta'in, that we also partly we seek His help in the way we perform that ruku. The how of it is where we need help. And what I mean by that is, we don't just bow just like that. There is a form to that of where the hands go and what happens to the back. In Sirr Salah, in the text Secrets of Salah, it is written that we should be careful about having a straight back in our ruku, because we should be mindful that with a crooked back, we are reflecting the crookedness of our nafs. Now, of course, this is figurative.
Yeah.
But when we straighten our back, what we are also doing psychologically is we strengthen our resolve. We firm our conviction to doing something, our motivation. With goal setting, physically we can manifest our goal setting by straightening our back, by strengthening our resolve. It links to Dua Kumail, where the master of spiritual psychology, Imam Ali alayhi salam, teaches قَوِّيَ عَلَى خِدْمَتِكَ جَوَارِهِ, strengthen for your service my bodily limbs, my physicality. Yeah. And so also we notice that when we have a straight back in ruku, we get a much better stretching of the back and the back of our legs as well. So there is actually a massage aspect of ruku. And when I was talking to a consultant orthopedic surgeon about, we were having, there was a majlis on the subject, and he came to me after and said, actually, as he was saying that as an orthopedic surgeon, he recommends a ruku as a way of particularly for the elderly who may not be able to engage in other physical activities, as a really good opportunity to just strengthen limbs and to get the joints moving in the right way, particularly the back. So we need to think about having a straight back in ruku, not just for our physical well-being, but also to remind ourselves about the purpose of that salah. And if in that quick 10-minute salah at work, I just straighten my back and in that process yield and seek help, it reminds me of what I can do when I get back to my desk. Yield to the reality, to the challenges I may be facing, bow to them, but be strong in facing them, knowing that I'm not alone. So I can be re-strengthened and re-empowered, yet modest and humble in the way I engage with that. Just as water can be very powerful, but is very flexible and flowing with the challenges and obstacles that it encounters. So that the combination of Qunoot and Ruku can serve as 2 points in the Salah to allow us to connect to that invitation of mindfulness of salah that the Quran recommends and promises the ultimate objective of success of قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. We too can be successful among the believers, successful in this world and in the hereafter, by engaging with the psychology of the Ruku and Qunoot to empower ourselves and to fulfill our original niyyah of qurbatan ilallah.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching this program as well. Hope it was beneficial for you and of many points to reflect upon, especially with the issue of practicality, how we can improve our salah, how we can be present in our salah within the environment that we are living. We are living in a world that is increasingly urbanized and stressed and rushed, and how can we actually maintain that presence of mind and awareness within our salah. Do keep watching. This, again, to remind our viewers, is a 10-part series, and we have another 3 parts to this series, inshallah. So tune in to the next one. We will see you in the next program. Assalamu alaikum.